Hey, my name is Gavin. I'm 25 and I fix things for a living. Anything that breaks, leaks, squeaks, or stops working, I can usually make it right again. Pipes, roofs, wiring windows that rattle in the wind. You name it, I've got the tools for it. I live in a small cedar shingled house on a quiet cul-de-sac just outside Asheville, North Carolina. The kind of neighborhood where the streets are lined with old maples that turn fire red every fall, and the mailboxes are all the same shade of forest green. Most of the folks around here are older, retired, or close to it. They wave when they walk their dogs at dusk, and nobody locks their doors unless they're leaving town for the weekend. My house sits at the end of the loop, a modest two-bedroom with a screened porch and a gravel driveway. It used to belong to my grandfather. When he passed, he left it to me, no strings attached. I moved in 2 winters ago, right after I finished trade school, and started taking jobs through word of mouth. The place needed work peeling paint, a leaky gutter, a furnace that coughed like an old smoker, but I fixed it piece by piece. Now it feels like mine. Simple, sturdy, quiet. Across the low white picket fence that separates my yard from the next is Lydia's house. She's 38 lives alone and has the prettiest lavender garden I've ever seen. Every spring, the bushes bloom in thick purple waves along the fence line, and the scent drifts over on warm evenings like a secret. She keeps an old wooden radio on her back porch that plays classical music every morning. Chopin, Beethoven, sometimes something slow and minor that makes the air feel heavier. I don't know much about her past, just that she's been divorced for 2 years and works from home as a freelance editor. She doesn't talk about the ex, and I don't ask. We met the first winter I moved in. It was late January, the kind of cold that sneaks under your skin and stays there. I was outside splitting firewood when I heard a faint banging from her side of the fence. A minute later, Lydia appeared at the gate, bundled in a thick cardigan, cheeks pink from the wind. Gavin, she called, like she already knew my name. I hate to bother you, but my water heater's making a noise like it's about to explode. Any chance you could take a look? I wiped my hands on my jeans and followed her inside. Her kitchen smelled like cinnamon and old books. The water heater was in a closet off the laundry room, an ancient tank that groaned and hissed like it was mad at the world. I tightened a valve, bled the air, replaced a corroded fitting. 40 minutes later, it purred like new. She tried to pay me. I refused. "You're my neighbor," I said. "Neighbors help." She poured me a mug of hot cocoa instead, thick and dark with a marshmallow, that melted into a sweet cloud. We stood in her kitchen steam, curling between us, and talked about nothing, the weather, the way the mountains look after a snow, how the mailman always parks in the same spot. When I left, she walked me to the gate. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was soft, like she wasn't used to asking for help. After that, things just happened, quietly. I'd bake too much cornbread on Sundays and leave a foil-wrapped square on her porch. She'd brew extra coffee in a stainless steel thermos and hang it on my side of the fence before I left for work. No notes, no fuss, just gestures. I'd see her watering the lavender at dawn earbuds and humming along to whatever was on the radio. Sometimes she'd wave. Sometimes she wouldn't. I never pushed. I told myself she was just a good neighbor, the kind of person who made the street feel safer. I didn't let myself think beyond that. Until the afternoon, everything shifted. I had a date that night. First one in months. Sarah, a friend of a friend graphic designer, laughed at my dumb jokes when we met at a cookout. She texted me the week before dinner Friday. I said yes before I could overthink it. Now it was Thursday, and I was standing in my bedroom, staring at 2 shirts like they held the secrets to the universe. A white button-down crisp from the dry cleaner. A gray Henley, soft, worn-in, comfortable. I held one in each hand, turning like an idiot in front of the mirror. White looked too formal. Gray looked like I didn't try. I needed a second opinion. Without thinking, I grabbed both shirts, walked out the back door, and crossed the yard to the fence. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. Lydia's porch light was on, even though it was barely dusk. I could hear faint piano music drifting from inside, something slow and wistful. I knocked. A moment later, the door opened. She stood there in a cream-colored sweater that slipped off one shoulder hair, twisted loosely at the nape of her neck. Her eyes flicked to the shirts in my hands, then back to my face. She didn't say anything, just raised an eyebrow. "Hey," I said suddenly, feeling like a kid. I need help." "Which one?" She stepped aside, motioning me in. The house smelled like vanilla and wood smoke. I followed her to the living room where a single lamp cast a warm glow over worn hardwood and books stacked in uneven piles. She took the shirts, held them up one at a time, tilting her head like she was sizing up more than fabric. After a long pause, she handed me the white one. "This," she said, "it makes you look sincere." I laughed, a short, nervous sound. "Sincere's good, right?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze lingered on my face, something unreadable flickering behind her eyes. "Depends," she said, finally voiced low, "on who you're trying to impress." I opened my mouth to thank her, to make a joke, to say anything, but the words caught. She looked down, fingers brushing the cuff of her sleeve. The music from the radio filled the silence, a single piano note hanging in the air like a held breath. And then, so quietly, I almost missed it, she said, "You're blind, Gavin." I blinked. "What?" She lifted her eyes to mine. They were steady, unguarded, a shade darker than I remembered. "I've liked you for a long time." The room tilted. The shirt slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. She didn't move, didn't take it back, just stood there waiting, like she'd finally said the thing she'd been carrying for months, and now the weight was mine to hold. Before I could speak, she turned, walked to the door, and stepped out into the evening. The gate clicked shut behind her. I stood in her living room alone, the white shirt crumpled at my feet, the echo of her words ringing in my ears like a bell I couldn't unhear. I left Lydia's house in a daze, the white shirt still clutched in one hand, like a flag of surrender. The evening air had cooled, carrying the faint scent of lavender from her garden, but it did nothing to steady the pulse hammering in my throat. Her words looped in my head, soft but sharp. "I've liked you for a long time." I wanted to chase after her, to say something, anything, but my feet stayed rooted to her porch until the gate's creak faded into silence. Back in my house, I tossed the shirt onto the bed and stared at it. Sincere. That's what she'd said. I laughed, a short, hollow sound that echoed off the empty walls. I was supposed to be getting ready for a date with Sarah, someone who didn't make my chest feel like it was caving in with a single sentence. Someone safe. Someone who didn't live 10 feet away, separated by a fence, and 13 years of life I hadn't lived yet. I showered, changed into the white shirt because I didn't know what else to do, and drove to the restaurant downtown. Asheville's lights blurred past the windshield, neon signs for craft beer, string lights over patios, couples laughing on sidewalks. I parked, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, and tried to shake Lydia from my mind. This was just dinner. Just a chance to meet someone new. Nothing more. Sarah was already at the table when I walked into the bistro, a cozy spot with brick walls and candles flickering in mason jars. She wore a green dress, hair curled, smile bright. She stood to hug me, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, something floral, but not lavender. We sat, ordered drinks, a beer for me, a glass of red for her. She talked about her design projects, a new client, a logo she was proud of. I nodded, smiled, asked questions, but every laugh felt forced, every word like I was reading a script. "You okay?" she asked halfway through the appetizer, tilting her head. "You seem distracted." I forced a grin. "Long week?" "Sorry." She waved it off, but her eyes lingered, curious. I stared at my plate of bruschetta, the tomatoes too red, the bread too crisp. All I could see was Lydia standing in her living room, sweater slipping off her shoulder, saying those words like they'd been waiting years to escape. "You're blind, Gavin." The rest of the night dragged. Sarah was nice, funny, smart, easy to talk to when I let myself try. We split a dessert walk to her car, and she hugged me again before driving off. "Text me," she said, hopeful. I nodded, but as her taillights disappeared, I felt nothing. No spark, no pull. Just the weight of an evening I'd spent somewhere else entirely. I drove home slower than usual, windows down, the mountain air sharp against my skin. My street was dark, porch lights glowing like low stars. Lydia's house was quiet, curtains drawn, no radio humming. I sat in my truck for a minute, keys still in the ignition, staring at the fence. The thermos she used to leave for me wasn't there. Hadn't been for days, I realized. Not since before she said it. Inside, I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the kitchen like I didn't know what to do with myself. The white shirt felt too tight, too clean. Too much like a costume. I peeled it off, threw it in the hamper, and pulled on an old t-shirt instead. My phone buzzed Sarah thanking me for dinner, a smiley face emoji. I stared at the screen thumb hovering, then set it face down. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay in bed ceiling fan, spinning lazy circles, and replayed every moment with Lydia. The cocoa that first winter. The cornbread. The way she'd hum while watering her flowers, oblivious to me watching from my porch. I told myself it was nothing, just neighborly kindness. But now her words cracked that open and I couldn't unsee it. The thermos, the smiles, the way she'd linger at the fence sometimes like she was waiting for me to say something first. I wasn't blind. I was scared. The next morning I woke to silence. No piano drifting over the fence. No clink of a thermos against my gate. I brewed coffee stronger than usual and stood at the kitchen window staring at her house. The lavender looked untouched, no footprints in the dew. I thought about knocking, apologizing, asking what she meant. But what would I say? I heard you. I'm just not sure what to do with it. Work kept me busy. A leaky faucet in an old Victorian downtown, a busted garage door in a newer subdivision. My hands moved on autopilot wrench, tightening screwdriver turning, but my mind was stuck on her. By noon, I was back in my truck radio off the quiet, louder than any song. I stopped at the bakery on the corner, grabbed a loaf of sourdough, and almost left it on her porch. But I didn't. I wasn't ready. That evening, I mowed my lawn, the roar of the engine drowning out everything else. When I finished, sweat sticking to my shirt, I glanced over the fence. Her curtains were still closed. No light. No movement. I felt it then, a pang I couldn't name. Not guilt, not exactly. Something heavier. Like I'd missed a chance I didn't even know I had. Days blurred. I saw Sarah once more coffee this time, but it felt like going through the motions. She was great, but she wasn't her. I stopped texting back. Lydia's house stayed quiet. No thermos, no radio, no lavender-scented breeze. I started waking earlier hoping to catch her outside, but she was never there. I'd stand at the fence, hands in my pockets, feeling like an idiot. One night I tried texting her. Hey, can we talk? My thumb hovered over send, then deleted it. What would I even say? Sorry, I didn't see you. Sorry, I'm 25 and you're 38 and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I didn't send it. Instead, I baked cornbread. Too much like always, wrapped a square in foil, walked to her porch and set it down. Knocked once. No answer. I left it there, walked back and didn't look behind me. The next morning, the foil was still there untouched. I told myself it didn't matter, but it did. I wasn't just fixing things anymore, I was breaking them. And the one thing I wanted to fix us, whatever we were, I didn't know how to start. The cornbread sat on Lydia's porch for 2 days. I saw it every time I pulled into my driveway, a silver square catching the sun like a tiny mirror reflecting my own stupidity. On the third morning, it was gone. No note, no sign she'd even touched it. Just empty space where it had been. I told myself that was something. At least she'd taken it inside, but the radio stayed silent and the curtains never moved. I threw myself into work. A kitchen remodel in West Asheville, a deck repair up in the hills. A furnace tune-up for an old couple who paid me in homemade jam and stories about the war. My hands stayed busy, but my head wouldn't shut up. Every pipe I tightened, every nail I drove, I heard her voice. I've liked you for a long time. It played on loop softer than the radio she used to leave on, louder than anything else. Sarah texted again. Coffee this week? I stared at the message, thumbs frozen. I typed sure, then deleted it. Typed rain check, then deleted that too. Finally, I just turned the phone face down and went back to sanding a countertop until my arms burned. Evenings were the worst. I'd sit on my porch with a beer watching the sky fade from orange to purple, waiting for a light to flicker on in her house. Sometimes it did a dim glow behind the curtains, gone as quick as it came. I'd imagine her in there reading, editing, maybe thinking about me. Or maybe not. Maybe she'd already moved on, chalked it up to a moment of weakness, a mistake she'd rather forget. The thought made my stomach twist. I started leaving things, not every day, just enough to test the water. A small bundle of kindling when I split wood. A jar of local honey from the farmer's market. A note, once hope you're okay, scribbled on a scrap of paper. I left it under the honey. The next morning, everything was gone. No response, no wave, Nothing. But I kept going. One Saturday, I fixed the loose board on her side of the fence. The wood had warped from the rain and the gate hung crooked. I didn't ask, just showed up with my toolbox, hammered it, straight, sanded the splinters. When I finished, I stood back, hands on my hips, sweat dripping down my neck. The gate swung smooth now, no creak. I glanced at her window. The curtain twitched. Just once. Then nothing. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of water, staring at the fence through the window. The moon lit up white pickets glowing like bones. I thought about knocking. About saying I'm not blind. I see you now, but what then? What if she laughed? What if she cried? What if she closed the door again? I didn't knock. Instead, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I fixed something. The next morning, I brewed coffee strong and black the way she liked it. Poured it into the old stainless thermos she used to leave for me. No note this time, just the coffee. I walked to her porch before the sun was fully up, set it on the step, and knocked once. Then I went back to my house, heart in my throat, and waited. An hour passed. 2. I pretended to read the paper, but my eyes kept drifting to her door. Finally, it opened. Lydia stepped out in a robe, hair loose, eyes squinting against the light. She looked at the thermos, then at my house. I froze behind the curtain. She didn't wave, didn't smile. Just picked it up, went back inside, and closed the door. But the thermos was gone. That was enough. I started showing up more. Not pushing, just there. I'd mow her side of the lawn when I did mine, replace the burnt-out bulb in her porch light, leave a small tin of lavender shortbread I baked from a recipe I found online. She never said thank you, never acknowledged it. But the tins came back empty. The light stayed on, the lawn stayed neat. One afternoon, I was on my knees in her yard tightening the hose bib that had been dripping for weeks. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the lavender. I didn't hear her come out until her shadow fell over me. "You don't have to do this," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it wasn't cold. I looked up. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, wearing an old UNC sweatshirt and jeans. Her hair was down, curling at the ends. She looked tired, but not angry. "I know," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "I want to." She didn't respond, just watched me finish. When I stood, she was closer than I expected. Close enough to smell the faint trace of vanilla on her skin. "Why now?" she asked. I swallowed. Because I was an idiot. A flicker of something crossed her face. Not a smile, but not a frown either. She nodded once like she'd heard enough and turned back to the house. But before she reached the door, she paused. "The coffee was good," she said, without looking back. "Thank you." Then she was gone. I stood there, rag in hand, feeling like I'd just been handed a lifeline. The next day, I left another thermos. This time, when I came home from work, it was on my porch. Empty, clean, and inside, folded neatly, was the scrap of paper I'd left weeks ago. "Hope you're okay." On the back in her handwriting, "I am now." I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I smiled, bigger than I had in weeks. We didn't talk about it. Not yet. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was waiting. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to step into it. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The house was still the only sound, the low hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of old wood settling. I brewed coffee stronger than usual and stood at the kitchen window watching the sky shift from charcoal to pale gold. Lydia's porch light was off. Her curtains were open for the first time in weeks, a sliver of soft yellow glowing from her living room. I took it as a sign. I didn't leave a thermos this time. Instead, I grabbed my toolbox, walked out back, and started on the fence. The bottom rail on her side had cracked clean through, probably from the last windstorm. I'd noticed it days ago, but hadn't touched it. Now felt like the right moment. I measured, cut a new piece from scrap pine in my shed, sanded the edges smooth. The work was simple, familiar. My hands knew what to do even when my head was spinning. By the time the sun cleared the trees, the rail was replaced, the gate swinging true again. I wiped sawdust from my jeans and glanced at her window. The curtain moved. Lydia stood there, coffee mug in hand, watching. She didn't wave, but she didn't look away either. I lifted a hand in a small salute. She nodded almost imperceptibly, then disappeared. I went to work. A bathroom remodel in Biltmore Village, a ceiling fan install in a condo near the river. My phone stayed quiet. No texts from Sarah, no surprise. I hadn't reached out since the second coffee date and she hadn't pushed. I told myself it was for the best. Clean break, no mess. When I got home, the thermos was on my porch again. This time, there was something inside. I unscrewed the lid. A single lavender sprig, still fresh, tied with a piece of twine. No note, just the flower. I held it to my nose, breathed in the sharp, sweet scent, and felt something loosen in my chest. That evening, I baked shortbread. The recipe was tricky butter too soft, sugar too coarse, but I followed it step by step. When they came out golden and crumbly, I packed half into a tin and walked over. Knocked once, waited. The door opened. Lydia stood there in a faded blue t-shirt, hair damp like she'd just showered. Her eyes flicked to the tin, then to me. "Peace offering," I said, holding it out. She took it, fingers brushing mine for a second longer than necessary. "You bake, now learning," I said. Figured I should earn my keep. She almost smiled. "Come in." I stepped inside. The house smelled like lemon polish and something baking, maybe apples. The radio was on low, some violin piece I didn't know. She set the tin on the counter, opened it, and took a piece. Bit into it. Chewed slowly. "Not bad," she said. "High praise." She laughed, a small surprise sound like she hadn't meant to let it out. "Sit." We sat at her kitchen table, the same one where I'd fixed her water heater 2 winters ago. She poured coffee into 2 mugs, no cream, no sugar. We drank in silence for a minute, the kind that wasn't awkward anymore. "I owe you an apology," I said finally. She looked up. "For what? For being blind?" She set her mug down. "I shouldn't have said it like that. It wasn't fair." "No," I said. "It was true. I just didn't know what to do with it." She nodded, eyes on the table. "I didn't either." Another silence, then, "I'm not good at this," I said. "The feelings thing. I fix things. I don't talk about them." I noticed she said, and this time she did smile. Small but real. I laughed under my breath. "Yeah, well, I'm trying." She reached across the table, touched the back of my hand just for a second. "You're here. That's enough." We didn't kiss, didn't hug, didn't make promises. But when I left an hour later, the tin was empty and the lavender sprig was on my porch, tucked under the thermos like a bookmark. The days after that fell into a new rhythm. I'd show up with my tools, fix something small, a loose cabinet hinge, a dripping faucet, a porch step that squeaked. She'd leave coffee or soup in a mason jar or a slice of pie wrapped in foil. We'd talk on her porch or mine, never long, never deep, but steady. Like we were building something out of scraps, one nail at a time. One Sunday, I was replacing the gutter on her side of the house. The ladder wobbled on the uneven ground. She came out with a second ladder, held it steady without being asked. "You'll fall," she said. "Only if you let go." She didn't. When I climbed down, she was still there, arms crossed, watching. "You missed a spot," she said, pointing to a leaf stuck in the downspout. I grinned. Perfectionist. Realist. I pulled the leaf out, tossed it into the yard. Better much. We stood there, the sun warm on our backs, the scent of lavender thick in the air. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck. She beat me to it. "Dinner," she asked. "Tonight. My place. I'm making lasagna." I nodded. "I'll bring dessert," she smiled. "You better." That night I showed up with a store-bought cheesecake and a bottle of red. She opened the door in a simple black dress, hair down barefoot. The house smelled like garlic and oregano. We ate at the table, no radio, just the sound of forks on plates, and the occasional laugh when the cheese stretched too far. After dinner, we sat on her porch swing. The sky was clear, stars sharp. She leaned back, feet tucked under her. "I used to hate this swing," she said. "My ex bought it. Said it was romantic. I thought it was ugly." I looked at it, old wood, faded cushions. "It's not so bad." She nudged me with her shoulder. "You're easy, only with you." She was quiet for a minute. "Then I was scared, that night. When I said it." "I know." "I thought you'd run. I almost did." But you didn't. No, I said, I didn't. She turned to face me. Why I met her eyes? Because you're worth staying for. She didn't cry, didn't kiss me, just leaned her head on my shoulder and we sat there until the stars faded and the crickets went quiet. 3 months slipped by like pages in a book you don't want to end. We never put a name on what we were. No labels, no announcements, no big talks about the future. Just mornings and evenings stitched together with small, deliberate acts. I'd wake to the low murmur of her radio drifting over the fence, Chopin or Debussy, never loud enough to wake the neighbors, just enough to remind me she was there. I'd cross the yard with my toolbox before the dew burned off the grass, fix whatever needed fixing, a shutter that rattled in the wind, a garden gate that sagged, the porch light that flickered when the humidity rose. She'd appear with 2 mugs of coffee, black no sugar, and we'd drink them on the steps while the sun climbed. Some days she'd be at her desk, headphones on fingers, flying across the keyboard editing manuscripts for authors I'd never heard of. I'd wave through the window and keep working. Other days she'd be in the garden, knees in the dirt, lavender dust on her jeans. I'd hand her the hose when her arms got tired. She'd smile without looking up. Evenings were ours. I'd grill steaks on my rusty Weber, carry the plates over the fence. She'd set the table on her porch, mismatched china cloth napkins, a candle stub in a jelly jar. We'd eat while the sky turned peach and indigo, talking about nothing urgent, the way the mountains looked after rain, the new bakery downtown, the stray cat that kept sneaking into her shed. Sometimes we didn't talk at all, just sat shoulder to shoulder, the swing creaking under us, her bare foot brushing my ankle. One Sunday in late September, the air crisp enough for sweaters, I found her in the garden pruning the lavender. The bushes were heavy with blooms, purple heads nodding in the breeze. I leaned on the fence, coffee in hand. If I asked you about the shirt again, I said the white one, what would you say? She didn't look up, just kept snipping. I'd say the same thing. It makes you look sincere. I grinned. And if I asked what you're wearing to walk with me today? She set the shears down, wiped her hands on her jeans, and finally met my eyes. Jeans. This old sweater. Boots if the path's muddy. She tilted her head. Why? Where are we going? Nowhere, I said. Just around the block. Maybe to the creek. Wherever you want. She smiled, slow and warm, the kind that started in her eyes and settled everywhere else. Give me 5 minutes. We walked the loop of our street, past the maples, just starting to turn past the mailboxes and the sleeping dogs behind picket fences. She slipped her hand into mine like it had always belonged there. We didn't speak much. Didn't need to. The silence was easy now, the kind that holds more than words ever could. When we got back, the sun was low, painting the fence gold. She stopped at the gate, turned to face me. I used to think love had to be loud, she said. Fireworks, grand gestures. But this? She gestured between us, the fence, the houses, the quiet. This is better. I nodded. It's enough. She leaned in, kissed me, soft and slow, tasting like coffee and September air. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against mine. You're not blind anymore, she whispered. No, I said. I see you. We stood there until the porch lights flickered on, up and down the street until the first star appeared. Then we walked through the gate side by side, the lavender brushing our knees, the radio humming something soft and old. No promises, no plans, just the next morning and the one after that. And for the first time in my life, that was everything.